Hello and welcome to season 13, episode 9 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
Hello, I'm Mark Bishop.
Why are you trying out a new intro every time now?
Well, I thought should be more sociable.
And then I think it made you sound less sociable.
Oh, go away.
We are, of
Spe-
course.
Speaking of the sentiment of going away,
hmm
we have a listener that is critical of compliments I make of her. So no more compliments.
I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that.
Yes.
We're of course reading Plato's Republic. This time we were talking about Book 8, where Socrates starts talking about the different kinds of societies. Right, so we had this whole discussion of what makes a perfect society. How do we educate people so that they become the perfect rulers? And he says, well, what do other societies look like? What do you
So
think of this chapter?
when did you read this?
I
Or
read it yesterday, I think.
okay, what did you think of it?
I thought it was pretty good. I like
Wrong.
his
That is wrong. Go ahead.
I like his distinctions here. I mean, it's of course very general, very sort of broad strokes of what makes a different, society, makes a different government a different government. Because he identifies, the timocracy, the oligarchy, the democracy, and then the tyranny. And essentially, it's sort of as a gradation where they get worse and worse each stage you move down. And he has his own, sort of pet ideas of how this happens and how one degrades into the next. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a fun read, at least to see what Plato thought about different societies. You made a really shocked face.
I was surprised by the word fun.
I enjoyed it.
It was a laugh riot.
It's gonna be one of these episodes.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Um,
I take it you did not enjoy this.
well, yeah, I mean, I think what you said about his descriptions of those types of societies were fine,
hmm
and well written, well reasoned, and especially for 2,000 plus years ago or 3,000. How many years ago was it?
About 2,500, give or
2,500.
take 100.
But we start off with his discussion, like kind of segueing into it, where
hmm
he's mentioning about his perfect society.
Right.
And he lost me right off the bat because it was just so. I'm going to repeat myself in this episode about that. Might as well repeat it right now, because he talks about how that he and his interlocutor
hmm
were in agreement that the perfect state would include women and children being held in common, among the society. There be no private quarters for
hmm
his guardians. And, they were just going to serve everybody else. Never mentions how he's going to, he talks in vague terms about how he's going to create that society with his
hmm
educational system, but never about how he's going to enforce it.
Right.
And then, like, is he going to have, a police force or something to keep these guardians in line? And then he describes these other societies that are the imperfect societies. And I expect he's going to get to it, but everything he says about how these imperfect societies are created applies to his perfect society,
hmm
right? So I mean, it's like it's just such a I don't know. It's frustrating, um, but I guess he's just trying to say, in a perfect world,
Right.
this is what a perfect society would be. But why even attempt? Again, it's my same complaint. Why even attempt to say how it would be possible when you know it's impossible?
hmm
It's just frustrating to me, because he's talking about, how how they would be separated. They'd have no property, and everything be held in community. The same
hmm
things that he said before, and it's just
Right.
frustrating. Oh, okay, well now we've established what the perfect society would be. Let's talk about the imperfect world we live in.
Right.
And then and maybe I'm sure you can explain to me why the first type is called timarchy,
hmm
timarchy,
hmm
timarchy.
Or democracy, yeah.
Mercy?
From the Greek word for honor, like
Oh, okay.
a civilization or society based on honor, and that's a good way to sort of just start talking here. But he says, after he gives his recap of what we've already ranted about plenty, He says there's these four types. He says there's your much admired Cretan or Spartan type, which is what he'll call
Yeah.
timocracy or timarchy. Secondly is oligarchy. Thirdly is democracy, and then finally is tyranny, and that's really the most diseased, right? So again, sort of flowing down less and less. You're getting worse and worse as things go on. So he first, throughout this book, he gives sort of an idea of what the society looks like, what their sort of structure is. Then he gives an example of like the average person of that society, or sort of the character of person that is created by that society. So it was interesting. I thought it was very interesting, sort of just as I look at what the ancient Greeks thought of different types of societies, how they thought the society affects the person, what sort of values you would have if you lived in the society, and things like that. So I thought it was an interesting read. I didn't agree with him in all parts. I thought his section on the faults of democracy I thought was really good, which we'll get to a little bit later. I think he made some great points there, but he starts off with this timarchy, right? This society based on honor. He says really our ideal state, if things start degrading, would first turn into this timocracy. And he says, well, how would this happen? He says the answer is perhaps simple. Change in any society starts with civil strife among the ruling class. As long as the ruling class remains united, even if it's quite small, no change is possible. How will change take place? And he says, well, really, there will inevitably be change. So he seems to sort of give up the idea that, this would be sort of this eternal society, or he admits like this would not last forever. There has to be some sort of society, or there has to be some sort of decay, even if it is this perfect society, because there's decay everywhere. He says, though the rulers you've trained for your city are wise, reason and observation will not always enable them to hit on the right and wrong times for breeding, right? So there's this whole eugenics thing.
Right.
So it seems like just because we can't accurately predict everything that will happen, decay will inevitably occur. And that seems to be his reason for why the perfect society could sort of devolve into a less perfect society, or an
Yeah.
imperfect society.
And I get that's what he's saying, but how does he not recognize that it's going to keep him from ever establishing the perfect
Right,
society?
right.
He talks about, well, the mating of brides and bridegrooms inappropriately. Like, what does he think is going to happen in any
Hmm.
society that you're not going to be able to control that?
Right,
I mean, you couldn't control it in any society. There, love finds a way, as they say.
right.
Um, I don't know. So,
Right. But he says, what ends up happening, based on his whole idea of sort of, some people are sort of better naturally and things like that, with his, the idea of the gold and the silver and the iron and the bronze, sort of the components of the person, right? He says essentially you will have two different camps arise. A group of people that is, better and is more driven by honor and excellence and duty, and a group that is not. And the group that is driven towards honor and excellence, they will be the new ruling class, but you will start to see this strife because now they will not exist for the good of the whole society, right? They're out for more than themselves, or they're out more so just for themselves,
right.
or for honor and things like that. But it's subsecting the population, right? It's only a small portion of the population, not caring for the whole good as he thought he could set up in his perfect society.
Right. And then I think he says that, correct me if I'm wrong, that essentially end up with oligarchy,
Yeah, exactly.
transitioning from that. And I don't know that that is the natural result of his whatever his perfect society is, because I think it's quite frankly more likely to have tyranny. You're
Yeah.
more likely in that honor code in his society where everything is held in common, that you'll have one strong man. That you'll end up having a leader that rebels against that oppressive structure,
Hmm.
and you'll either have an anarchy and who knows what follows after that,
Right.
or you're going to have a tyranny.
Right.
I don't know that you have this almost easy segue into an oligarchy where there's
Hmm.
a bunch of rival factions, which, depending on how violent they are, could be better or worse than a tyranny
Hmm.
of one or a few. But
Right.
and so I don't buy his. That's how his society
Hmm.
fails.
Right.
Of course, I don't buy that society could have existed. But once they exist, I mean, like I said, in order to have that society, you have to have so much coercive force applied to the people that who know it would be a tyranny.
Right.
You'd have Socrates as the tyrannical
Hmm.
leader, forcing everybody to follow his edicts. So in order to have it, you'd have to have a tyranny. It
Mm.
couldn't exist without a
Yeah.
tyrannical power to force the creation of it.
And I think he almost kind of says that towards the end of this book, where,
Hmm.
once we get to the final stage of tyranny, he says, well, then you can kind of recover the ideal society. It seems to be that's what he leans towards. He kind of, I think, acknowledges that you need the tyrant to set up the perfect society in the first place. And it kind of is this cycle almost, it seems like to him.
Yeah,
So I think,
I think he's a what do you call it? A proto-Marxist, proto-communist.
yeah.
I mean, really, I mean, it's you can't have the perfect society unless you have a strong hand
Hmm.
to create the society, and then we'll have Eden.
Yeah.
Everybody will share everything because we'll make you share everything, and then of course
Right.
the people in power will be able to share a little bit more.
Right.
I don't know.
Um, Yeah, because
Anyway,
he does say, as you mentioned, this is like section 548A, 281 for us in our edition. But he says, yeah, that you will then have this love for money. And that's when, after this next section, he talks about that's when oligarchy comes about. He says, if you do have this sort of internal division, you're sort of splitting people up into these two different groups, money becomes a lot more important because everybody's not working for the good of the whole society. And you will start to, hoard money, and the people in power will start to have money. But then he says, okay, well, what is the tamarchic character? What is sort of the character of a
mm,
person that is formed by the society? And I think this really does go back to his original point about, the state as the analogy of the soul and things like that. Of, well, what does this look like if we apply this to the human soul? And generally, he says, right, that it's this very ambitiously driven person, right? Very
yeah,
energetic, very athletic, sort of a driven person. But again, like the society at large, there's this inner conflict. There's this uncertainty about everything. You're right. You're not united to the same common purpose as you once were. Even though you do have a lot good going for you, is essentially what he says. You have that ambition, you have that energy, you have essentially like the willpower, right? Going back to the parts of the soul, you have like an overabundance of willpower, but you don't have the right, sort of guiding reason on top of that.
yeah, and I think the way he describes is like you're idealistic. This person will be idealistic in his youth,
Hmm.
and then be corrupted over time.
Right,
Well, I don't know how that's different than everybody. Everybody in his society is
right.
gonna, or everybody kind of goes through that idealistic um, phase or whatever. But whatever.
Hmm.
I mean, you're gonna have that same character in a democracy
Hmm.
of people. It's so frustrating because like you're going to have people like that in every society.
Hmm.
You're going to have that whether it's an oligarchy or tyranny or democracy or whatever. You're going to have some people that are like this. You're going to have some people that are different. I mean, it just seems I don't think you can have a typical person of character of the society. I think you can get a feel for like we talked about in previous seasons, like Orestes Bronson said, there's a culture or there's a
Hmm.
nation that almost has a psychologic element to it. Like a belief
Right.
system that's accepted, certain principles are accepted. I get that,
Hmm.
but I don't think you can say that this is that type of person. It's
Right.
like an amalgamation of all these different
Right.
people that have anyway. So
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you buy my point that I kind of keep coming back to, then it's that sort of idea of, well, he's not so much talking about the societies as he's talking about particular types of people, right? What happens when your soul is disordered, right? How do you view the society? How does that look on the individual level? That's kind of, I think, more of what he's describing. That's why he has this description of the characters. You'd expect in sort of just like a political science text, right? Just studying the different societies. You wouldn't talk about this weird idea of the particular character of that society. But it goes back, I think, to what he was talking about originally of justice and what that looks like in the soul. We can study that by putting forward these sort of hypothetical societies or this ideal society. But I digress. But then he turns to oligarchy, right? And we've kind of already said like how he sees that happen,
yeah,
is that he says, you have this replacement of, what was good in that previous society where there's still this nobility, this honor, this ambition. Well, you start to see, well, people start to, hoard private resources and build up wealth and things like that. And all of a sudden you're sort of exchanging the nobility for the wealth. And all of a sudden it's the wealthy few, who then have the sort of power in that society. He says, yeah, and they make a minimum amount of property to hold office and things like that. You have to have a certain amount of wealth. And then he also talks about that's when you have this emergence of the drone class, is what he calls them, where you just have these people who are essentially just their purpose in the society is to do the oligarch's bidding, right?
yeah.
They're sort of just like the the middle people without much, of their own purpose in life, right? They're not sort of contributing to the whole, they're not contributing to the good of society, writ large. Their purpose is just to serve whatever the oligarchs want. And that's sort of what happens when you switch from timarchy to oligarchy.
Yeah, and I don't know why he thinks it's more likely for the timarchy to flow into an oligarchy as opposed to democracy flowing
Hmm.
into an oligarchy.
Right.
Because in a democracy, if you have factions that are able to manipulate the group for their own benefit, like we have in our current democratic republic,
Hmm.
some people argue, and to some effect, that we have kind of an oligarchy now,
Right.
or it's like a rule of the, what do they say, the thousand. Like there's a
Hmm.
thousand people that are in this kind of loose confederation of the people that rule us.
Right.
The super wealthy, super powerful.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, it is in defense of the book, it is a quick read. This book,
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
section of the
Yeah.
book. I agree with what you're
Um,
saying earlier.
yeah.
And then he
'Cause he's-
talks about the character of that
mhm.
that type of oligarchic
Right.
person.
Right. But yeah, he says, this is the type of person, he's going to be frightened by his sufferings and loss of property. He incontinently dethrones courage and ambition from the place they have held in his heart. Again, sort of talking about the soul and things like that. Right. He says it's really starts to prioritize money, right? That is essentially what happens to the oligarchic character. Not even if you're not, one of the oligarchs, if you're a beggar in the society, everything that you do is going to be concerned with, how are you going to, live? How are you going to find, the next, scrap of money that you can find to do anything. But he says, really, that is what takes over, right? It's not about ambition. It's not about a purpose. It's about money and sort of any of the power and sort of necessary things that come from that. And that's the character of the oligarchic man.
Yeah, and I like this description because I think this describes our rulers in Washington D.C. currently, and I think it explains to me why they hated and feared the January 6th people so
Mm,
much. This is on page 286. He says it's probable inability to wage war is another discreditable feature. The oligarchs can't do this because they must either arm the people whom they fear worse than the enemy, or if they don't, have the thinness of their ranks. So it's shown upon by the stress of battle. At the same time, they're too grasping to want to pay for the expenses of war. And I think that's true of an oligarchy. They fear their own people. And of course, it's true of tyrannical governments. I mean, we see who knows what's going to happen in Iran in the next
hmm
24 to
Yeah.
48 hours, but they certainly fear their own people more right
hmm
now.
Right.
And there are some reports that they're killing them in numbers. But yeah, I mean, it's always shocking. Maybe I'll get off the January 6th thing. I'll get to like local politicians from personal experience. Many years ago, I might have mentioned this too. Many years ago, there was a shooting at a city hall
Mm,
up in Kirkwood. It wasn't one of my cities, but all of my cities said we need to have metal detectors for the public coming to our meetings because they got spooked. I understand they got spooked, but in that particular shooting, this person shot two police officers outside the building and then went in and shot another officer and
mm.
then shot at the city attorney. And he only lived because he threw chairs at the guy in the meeting room, literally.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah, he just retired.
Hmm.
So, but it's like a lot of times, and it's true of like judges. Like the judges are elected in our county here in Missouri, and I joke that you can't spit in election season. You can't spit without hitting an attorney running for judge. But as soon as they become judge, they're like, we need to lock down this building. We can't have these people coming back here. And I remember one judge who's since lost re-election, but he was insisting on getting bulletproof glass for
Hmm.
his office in this old courthouse because somebody could just shoot him from the
Hmm.
parking lot. And I said, well, they can just shoot you in the parking lot. Where do you think your car's parked? I mean, what are you, an idiot?
Hmm.
And so, and they're actually still on this kick. So they just got cameras installed all around the courthouse to give them protection. I'm like, that just gives us evidence.
Hmm.
You know? Nobody's monitoring it. They're just recording us.
Right, right.
But anyway, so I did like that quote
Hmm.
from the book because it struck a nerve with me about a lot of our elected officials and our leaders. It's like they fear the people more than they fear anybody who would be an enemy.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
I like this line too on page 288, section, I guess 553. What would this be? 553D. I guess I think this is actually Glaucon saying this. He says, "There's no transition quicker or more violent than that from ambition to avarice."
yes,
I really like that line, right? It's very easy to be motivated, like kind of how he says in your youth, right? To be motivated by these ideals and be really ambitious. And then all of a sudden you get into a position, it's like, oh, hang on, there's a lot of money to be made here. There's a lot of, power that can be gained here, right? And, the ideals and the reason and everything like that. He says, reason and ambition squat in servitude at its feet. Reason forbidden to make any calculation or inquiry, but how to make more money. Ambition forbidden to admire or value anything but wealth and the wealthy. He says
yeah,
you start off with these sort of noble ideals, but they very, very quickly can vanish, and they vanish very, very violently.
yes, and that's the description in a nutshell of what he considers the oligarchic
Right.
character.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
it's
And then from there, he turns to democracy because he says, well, now we have, this whole drone class, these beggars and sometimes criminals, right, that aren't really contributing anything. They don't have jobs necessarily. There's gonna be a lot more of them in an oligarchy. That's sort of what happens. It's the source of where democracy comes from. But he says the oligarchy changes in democracy in the following way: as a result of lack of restraint in the pursuit of its objective of getting as rich as possible. And he says the rulers essentially owe their power to wealth. And so they want to keep all the wealth in themselves. They want to prevent, the young from squandering anything, right, from their children and things like that. And he says you can't. He says this is at the top of page 291 for us. He said, "Then be clear that love of money and adequate self-discipline in its citizens are two things that can't coexist in any society. One or the other must be neglected, right? Because if your society's based on love of money, of gaining wealth, then you can't adequately rein in the people who are going to become the rulers, right? Because all of wealth is, pursuing, whatever you want to do. Well, how do you keep order in a society like that? This is essentially his argument. He says some are in debt, some are disenfranchised, some are both, some are settled down, armed with their stings and hatred in their hearts to plot against those who have deprived them of their property and against the rest of society, and to long for revolution. Right? These people who might have had wealth in the past, once they become drones, there's going to be this animus that arises against the upper class or the ruling class. And it's going to become very violent very quickly, is what he seems to say, right? And you really can't stop that from occurring. But he says, yeah, as it is, the oligarchs reduce their subjects to the state we have described, while as for themselves and their dependents, their young men live in luxury and idleness, physical and mental, become idle, and lose the ability to resist pain or pleasure. So he says it's this twofold problem, right? Where the ruling class is so hard on the people that they have an immense rage towards the ruling class, and the ruling class gets so soft in their pursuit of wealth that they can't do anything properly. They've lost their ambition, they've lost their ideals. All they want is to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. And then you cannot have a functioning society like that. And then once the ruling class sort of steps over its bounds, then the lower class is going to rise up and overthrow them.
I think that's where I think we're in that stage now, aren't we? I mean, like
It seems like it sometimes.
both the Republican, the MAGA movement
Hmm.
and the socialist commie movement within the Democratic Party, I think are both making noises about this overthrow of the oligarchs. Now, of
Hmm.
course, there's some overlap and who we all agree is the oligarchs, but they're not complete overlap.
Hmm.
But he even says that democracy originates when the poor win, kill, or exile their opponents and give the
Hmm.
rest equal civil rights and opportunities of office. This appointment to office being, as a rule, by lot, which
Hmm.
we have not gotten that far down the
Hmm.
path. But I bet you if we had a vote, like a nationwide vote, should we select our leaders by lot or lottery? I think that would pass. I think the
Hmm.
majority of people would just say, let's, and you know what? I might even vote for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the old joke was it Buckley ran for mayor.
Hmm.
I think it was during his mayoral campaign for New York, where he said I would, or was he talking about juries? That he would picking like the random people out of the phone book to lead our city would be a better choice than what we have now.
Right.
And there's some truth to that.
Hmm.
Because if you have and I think if you're describing an oligarchy, that's true. You probably end up with more civic minded people if you just pick them randomly than if you have a corrupt cast of characters that are in power.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so he thinks
Uh,
it would go from that to democracy by
mhm.
way of some short term anarchy, probably.
Yeah, it
Uh,
seems like it. I
yeah.
like what he says on the top of page 293 for us 557C. He says, I dare say that a democracy is the most attractive of all societies. The diversity of its characters, like the different colors in a patterned dress, make it look very attractive.
Mm.
Indeed, perhaps most people would, for this reason, judge it to be the best form of society, like women and children when they see gaily colored things. And
Yes.
I think that's really true because it's everything, everybody can kind of just do whatever they want. And everybody, you have the most variety of character, you have the most sort of variety of opinion and things like that. And he says that makes it seem like it would be very, very good to have just sort of from the beginning. It's kind of similar to John Rawls's argument in some ways. Are you familiar at all with
I
John
think so.
Rawls?
Yeah.
Yeah, with his idea that like before you're born, if would you rather be in a society essentially where everybody is just sort of equal, and you could just choose to be in that society rather than a society where some people are unequal and things like that.
Mm.
And that would be the most attractive to us. But he says there are a lot of problems. Um, and he says the really big problem is at the top of page 294 for us. He says democracy with a grandiose gesture sweeps all this away, right? All of the exceptional gifts and sort of values that a good politician should have. It sweeps all this away and doesn't mind what the habits and background of its politicians are, provided they profess themselves the people's friends. They are
Mm.
duly honored, right? So as long as you side with the people, as long as you just sort of give them what they want, it doesn't matter how good of a ruler you are, you can stay in power. He says that's a recipe for disaster, as we will see when he talks about the shift into tyranny after that.
So if you were given the choice
Hmm.
between a true democracy, not a
Hmm.
democratic republic, a democracy with like no Bill of Rights,
Hmm.
just a true democracy, or a benevolent dictator, which would you pick?
Oh, a benevolent dictator. I mean, I think that's an obvious question.
Now, the key word would be benevolent.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
of course,
funny.
then the democracy could just choose to kill me, and there'd be nothing I could
Yeah.
do about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Um,
People don't, there's been such a fetishization of democracy and
mhm.
voting over my entire lifetime that people don't understand the danger of it.
Right.
They have
Yeah.
no concept of the Bill of Rights and our Constitution is the only thing saving us from really horrible things
Hmm.
happening
Yeah.
in our country. And they
Yeah.
think, well, we need to get rid of this protection. It's like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh.
Right. Right.
Um, anyway, so
Um,
moving on.
He says, then he talks about the democratic character,
Ah,
right?
yeah.
Which is essentially, what we see in the society writ large, that you can kind of do whatever you want, but you're not going to have those values. You're not going to have those virtues, essentially. You're not going to have that discipline, right? Because if everything's open to you, right, then there's nothing really to pursue, right? You have no obligation to sort of pursue the good of society. You have no obligation to sort of, help everybody else. But you would really only pursue what is just absolutely necessary for you and then your own desires. And that's about it. There's no obligations. There's no sort of ambition that is there, and that's just something that would be very much lacking in the sort of democratic character. Right? Everything's equal. There's nothing really driving you.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that.
Yeah.
I mean, just because your political rights would be equal,
Hmm.
and you could have a tyranny of the majority. He says one day it's wine, women, and song, and there's no order or restraint in life. I don't know that that has to be the case.
Hmm.
You can still be a person of character and have equal footing with everybody else politically.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to have an equal amount of wealth. I mean, of
Hmm.
course, the majority could take it away from you, but a lot of times the majority won't go after you for fear that a different majority would go after them.
Right.
At some point you recognize the danger. So I don't know that I agree with that description
Hmm.
of of a democratic character. I
Hmm.
think it's overly broad, but
Right.
whatever. So he
But then
goes
he
to
turns.
tyranny because
Yes.
he assumes that democracy is going to turn into tyranny
Hmm.
because you need to somebody will rally the public because that's
Right.
that's the whole job. If you're going to be successful in a democracy, you have to get the majority on your side on a consistent basis. And
Hmm.
so what happens with that? Well, you have all these followers and then tyranny.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
let's pass a law that makes me in charge.
Yeah.
And then bam, and then it's like, well, wait, let's pass a law so nobody can take it away from me. Okay,
Mhm.
bam, I am now the ruler. But that's the 1-2
Right.
step.
Yeah. Exactly.
All tyrannical people. I mean, it's like you have a what would they say, a free and fair election once. You like they did that in Gaza. They elected Hamas, and then they never had an election again. They
Hmm.
elected the Palestinian Authority and never had another election. And they elected Hugo Chavez in
Right.
Venezuela.
Yeah.
They did have elections after that of varying reliability
Hmm.
or declining reliability over
Right.
time. But I think he was probably reelected legitimately,
Hmm.
um, paying off, the masses with government expenses and all that stuff. And then before you knew it, he's a dictator, and then he hands it over to his buddy Maduro. Now Maduro's in jail in New York.
Right.
Anyway,
But yeah,
sidetrack.
that's what he says essentially in section 564A, page 301 for us. He says, so from an extreme of liberty, one is likely to get in the individual and in society a reaction to an extreme of subjection, right? From this just absolute, wealth of liberty, everybody do whatever they want. Somebody's going to come along and say, everybody's going to do whatever I want them to do. And that is sort of the necessary result of this extreme democracy here.
Yep.
And he does say that a different thing can kind of happen as well, or there's sort of like three types of people in the democracy, right? Where you have, let us suppose a democratic society falls into three groups, as indeed it does. First comes the group we have mentioned, larger than in an oligarchy because of the freedom it gets, right? The people who kind of run the show, de facto, right? The ones who sort of the group of people that the leaders are drawn from, essentially. He says there's a second group which continually emerges from the mass, right? Everyone, the steadiest characters, those who are most successful in making money. He says then the drones, find them the most convenient source. That's the rich, and then the third is just the mass of the people, right, who take little interest in politics. Where he says, even if the society is not set up in this way, by having this freedom, by having this liberty, these things will naturally emerge, right? You have the people who are essentially the rulers, the people who are essentially the rich, and then just the masses. And then the tyrant comes about as a result of that, right? By, one of the rich essentially just pledging to the masses, like, I will be your personal voice. I will take the society back. It's time for you guys to pay attention to politics, and you're going to pay attention to me. And
Mm.
that's essentially what happens.
And that's and I'm not agreeing with this argument, but
Mhm.
that's generally the argument that the Democrats are trying to make about Trump.
Right.
Is that he, you're trying to follow him, and there's a guy that I won't identify, but he's a writer that I enjoy reading, but he's really acerbic, and Trump had just announced that somehow he's going to put a cap on credit card interest rates at
Hmm.
10% for the year 2026 only, I guess. And I don't know that how he could possibly even think that would be legal.
Hmm.
But this person's thought was screw them. I don't think it's legal, but those credit card companies have been sticking it to us all these years, and they allied themselves. The CEOs allied themselves with the Democrats, so now it's
Hmm.
time to punish them. It's like that kind of resonated with me, but then I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah. I have seen people making jokes about that specifically, like comparing him to like Roman emperors.
Yes,
Like on the
that's
anniversary of the reign of Donaldus Magnus, he has passed a law banning usury across the empire, and
yes,
I'm like, yeah, there's a
yeah.
comparison to be made for sure.
And then
Um,
the question is, I think the Congress could pass. I mean, like that we have usury laws. We have laws that set maximum interest rates on loans that are enforceable, either state level or federal level. So it can get done, I think. I mean, I don't think he can just do it by fiat. Um, he could certainly get it done by agreement. If he strong arms them, they may just voluntarily, and put
right,
air quotes.
right,
But yeah, but I mean, a lot of that would resonate with a lot of people.
yeah,
And he's an interesting cat, and
hmm,
and the fact that he's so demonized, I'm reluctant to criticize him.
yeah,
It's like I don't want to just pile on.
right.
and I just kind of wanted to watch the show, which is probably the most crazy thing to say. But
Hmm.
I did like how Plato mentioned, the tyrant comes to power. This is on page 307. He says, I don't forget who's he. It's this his interlocutor says, the tyrant will dare to use violence against the people who fathom. But he says, yeah, yes. He says when he has disarmed them.
Hmm.
So it's like, the tyrant's going to take on the people, but only if he's disarmed them first,
Right.
which was a good argument for the Second Amendment.
Right.
Because that's what tyrants always do. It's the commies always do. Just take away your guns.
Yeah.
That's Australia did that,
Yeah.
and then they had one a father son duo shoot up a beach for like a half hour
Hmm.
because nobody around them had a gun. You do
Right.
that in Jefferson County, and the probably the most dangerous thing that would happen if somebody did a shooting in public in Jefferson County is get caught in the crossfire because it would be like
Yeah.
it would be coming from four different directions. Wait a second. Even if you pull out your own gun, there'd be somebody behind you shooting at them. They're yelling, duck. I got a clean shot. Not through the back of my head.
I do like just kind of as a final paragraph because we have to wait for the tyrannical character for next time.
Yeah.
The section immediately after what you just read, he says, "So the tyrant is a parricide and little comfort to his old parent. In fact, here we have real tyranny, open and avowed, and the people find, as the saying is, that they've jumped out of the frying pan of subjection to free men into the fire of subjection to slaves." And exchanged their excessive and untimely freedom for the harshest and bitterest of servitudes, where the slave is master.
Mm,
Right? Where it's, you just have this person who is this tyrant. You have taken all of your liberty and you've given it up completely. And that is all that you have.
yes. Gotta be careful.
Yes, that's right. Do you have any other thoughts on this chapter?
Not really. Do you
Yeah.
have any final thoughts?
I did. I'm forgetting where it was at. Um, Yeah, this is where it was. This is back on page 297. I like this section where he's talking about democracy again. So going back to that, I meant to mention this earlier. But he says, essentially, one of the problems is when, the sort of the poor come to power and sort of the masses take over. He says they make themselves masters by force of arms. They call shame silliness and drive it into disgrace and exile. They call self-control cowardice and expel it with abuse. And they call on a lot of useless desires to help them banish economy and moderation, which they maintain are mere provincial parsimony. He goes on, he says, they praise them all extravagantly and call insolence, good breeding, license, liberty, extravagance, generosity, and shamelessness courage. Right, where he
Mm,
says in this democracy, where you have a confusion of sort of what the desires are, and this is sort of where he's talking at the end of democracy, what are the problems with democracy, that you do have these praising of the bad things instead of what the good things are. You have this confusion of what the virtues are, and you're picking the vices over them, right? The difference between license and liberty. Like license is the good thing. License is true liberty, right? Do whatever you want, fulfill every desire you want. Well, that's not true liberty because then you're making yourself less free.
yes.
Right, but he says you have this confusion. I thought that was really good when I read that. I'm like, yeah, that could be pretty spot on for a very sort of libertarian minded society.
Yes, and I agree with that 100%. In a society that's not Christian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or maybe there's some other religions that if you had a majority religion in a democracy, maybe other religions would be all right. But I don't mean that to denigrate other religions. I just think that's part of why the United States of America has been successful for so long is
Hmm.
uh, is the Christian and a lot of the Protestant ethics, like even like those crazy Calvinists, they're great citizens.
Hmm.
Devout Christians of really almost any faith are great citizens.
Hmm.
You know, because they aren't revolutionary.
Hmm.
Because they give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But they on their own initiative, they're going to do community service. They're going to be the guardians,
Hmm.
as Plato describes,
Hmm.
because of the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Right.
I mean those ideals that he describes are really Christian ideals ultimately, and so those
Hmm.
are the guardians of society, and so you don't have to worry about the structure if you get. And obviously I'm talking about devout practicing Christians, not just people that give it lip service and then go steal everything or rape people or whatever. But anyways,
Yeah,
that's my
yeah,
deep thought for the night.
yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good thought to end on if you have no more.
I'm all out. I'm
Well,
expired.
well, then this has been season 13, episode 9 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.